Food and Wine Insider is a weekly look at a $1.5 trillion industry touching every American. Devoted to the business of purveying food and decanting wines, Food and Wine Radio is a unique program highlighting not food recipes or wine vintages, but how to make a profit while satisfying America's palates. In this competitive but highly rewarding sector, many men and women have made profits while fulfilling a dream. Food and Wine Insider is all about better managing any business involving food and wine. Each week, your co-hosts sit down with successful restaurateurs, food mavens, winery vintners, store owners, food suppliers, and other leaders in the worldwide industry that centers on foodstuff and wine. In frank give-and-take sessions, guests and panelists talk about the business of bringing healthy and pleasurable foods and wines to others. Your Food and Wine Radio host are Ann Daw, former president of the Specialty Food Association and a longtime food executive who has held senior positions both here and abroad with Kraft Foods and Philip Morris. Don Mazzella, a nationally known business commentator. On each show, they invite leaders of the world's culinary and wine industries to share the secrets of their success. Visit us at foodandwineinsider.com.
Well, this is Ann Daw, your host, Food and Wine Insider. Today, I have invited Jason Walker, Marketing Director of Firsd Tea North America, to join us. Welcome to Food and Wine Insider, Jason.
Thanks, Ann, for having me. Look forward to it.
Jason, in looking at your background, it seems that you have been involved with tea for a very long time, both from a consulting side, events planning, and now at Firsd Tea. Please tell our listeners a little bit about what's behind that passion for tea.
As we were just kind of chatting a little bit before we started, I started by living in China for about 7 years and was able to get kind of hands-on experience with Chinese tea, going to farms, talking to retailers, and just kind of appreciating Chinese teas. From there, I came back to the States, and it was about the time that I saw a good window for specialty teas because they were coming in. People didn't really know that much about them. I started a small company, a small online publication actually, where I was writing and doing some consulting with tea retail to help people really understand and learn to appreciate these new wonderful teas that were coming in. Along the way, working with media, working with publications, and then the opportunity stepped in with Firsd Tea. Firsd Tea is actually China's largest tea exporter and the world's largest green tea exporter, and they've been at the business for about 50, 60 years now.
You know, Firsd Tea is spelled F-I-R-S-D.
Yes.
Tell us why the name of the product is spelled that way.
So Firsd Tea is our parent company is Zheijang Tea Group, and Zheijang Tea Group had a operation that was called in Chinese Firsd, and the best transliteration that we came up with that sounded more Americanized and easier to pronounce was first, but we put the D on it to keep that kind of one of the characters of the Chinese name.
You know, you mentioned that you are a U.S. subsidiary of Zheijang Tea Group, and that group was founded in 1950, so it's really been in the tea business a very long time. It's the largest tea exporter from China and the world's leading green tea exporter. Can you tell us a little bit more about your parent company?
Yes, they focus primarily on Chinese green teas, although they do carry a full line of green teas, oolong teas, black teas. Some of your listeners may be starting to learn about pu'er teas, which is a whole separate category that's often called a dark tea now. The company operates 135,000 or so hectares of tea fields in China. About 10,000 plus of organic tea fields. The number has changed, but it's at least about 18 operation facilities. Our newest one outside of Hangzhou actually has robots operating, so it's a more automated, state-of-the-art facility. Decaffeination, we've got one of the few decaffeination facilities in the area. And that is for those who are interested, it's a cleaner CO2 decaffeination compared to the more conventional ethanol acetate, the EA decaffeination, for those who know coffee and tea terms.
No, that's a really good point, because natural caffeination in coffee is really now done via water versus via chemical. It's really great to hear that the same can be said for tea. In 2015, Firsd Tea became part of the Ethical Tea Alliance, and from what I understand, the Ethical Tea Alliance has worked alongside your parent company for many years to improve their social and environmental management. Can you talk a little bit about some of the efforts with the Ethical Tea Alliance?
Yes, Zheijang Tea Group and Firsd Tea have been active since from the early days, like you said, of the Ethical Tea Partnership, bringing people over to places of origin, helping them understand what working conditions are like, what facilities are like, and helping people to appreciate what is actually involved with what it means to have an ethical tea. So we're proud to be a part of that, and we're advancing those steps as we can.
Can you talk a little more about some of the specific programs?
I have not been involved in those, so I would have to dig up that information for you later.
Okay. And is there anything from the U.S. side, since you run on the U.S. side of the business, some of the social and environmental philosophies that you have in terms of how the tea is processed or how the tea is brought to the States, anything that we could share with our listeners?
Yeah, so I can tell you that tea operation is different from some of the stories that many people hear about, for example, labor conditions in some farms and plantations in other countries. China doesn't operate under those large type of plantation systems. Actually, a lot of the farms and operational areas are small farms. There's not a big agribusiness type of situation where you've got hundreds of people on a plantation and they're having to provide schools and medical facilities. These are small villages in some instances, or even suburban areas where people have all of their regular community access. They're getting competitive wages because in China it's a very mobile population at the time. It's actually there are some trends where people are trying to leave the rural areas because the jobs are in the urban areas. China's general population is shifting towards a more urban, but the government is actually offering greater incentives to keep more jobs and more activity in the rural areas to balance out a lot of that urban influx at the moment. So that's to say that the tea workers, tea laborers, the tea industry itself is supporting the people involved. The government has initiated, and they've been doing this now for about 14, 15 years. They have what's called the China Number 1 document. And the Number 1 document is the whole national plan for how to develop agriculture. A big part of that is improving yields of crops without harming the environment. And so they've done things like for other industries like pork and soybeans. They have dedicated regional areas where those particular crops or products are grown, processed to reduce any kind of smaller facilities that may be overlooked in the terms of inspection of environmental concern. So they're actually increasing their management to protect the environment and to protect the people involved.
Well, that's fantastic to hear. We've been speaking with Dave. He's the marketing director of Firsd Tea North America. I think having heard what you just said about what China is doing to really support agriculture is so incredibly important, because the move to urban has almost created some wastelands in China, and getting back to their agricultural roots is incredibly important. What are some of the challenges for you in importing tea from China and bringing it to the U.S. market? It would be interesting for you to talk about that, and then how you distinguish Firsd Tea from all the other branded players on the market.
So, of course, right now there's very keen interest in the U.S.-China trade war and how it's going to affect tea. And that is probably one of the driving questions at the moment. And our assessment is that it is highly unlikely at the moment that the trade war will affect tea for a few reasons. The general stated goal of the trade war is to protect U.S. Industries, but the U.S. does not have a significant degree, any commercial level of tea production. So, blocking Chinese tea from entry to the U.S. will not protect the U.S. industry. China also consumes 85+% roughly of its own tea. So they have plenty of room to grow in terms of their per capita consumption of tea. China economics are showing that there are more consumers, mid and upper income consumers, who are ready for quality products. So a challenge is, of course, bringing in good teas at the right price when you're competing with a large domestic audience for those same teas.
So tell us a little bit about, obviously you know a lot about Firsd Tea, but what makes your tea so special? When you talk to consumers about why they should choose Firsd Tea, what are some of the things that you talk about and you focus on?
Yeah, so it's easy to kind of conceptualize Chinese tea as just tea from China, but you have to remember that China is the birthplace of tea. They've been doing tea for thousands of years, and in doing so, they've created distinct characteristics. So it is not that teas are interchangeable. A green tea from China is not going to taste like a green tea from Japan because of terroir, because of processing methods, because of the tea varieties being used in different places. So Chinese tea is a diverse spectrum, a treasure trove of various flavors, characteristics, and that's something that has to be appreciated, and we hope that people come to love the wide variety of flavors and characteristics of Chinese teas, whether they are drunk straight as a specialty tea or used in a component of a blend or something else.
So how do you talk about Firsd Tea to the consumer here in the U.S. to bring those characteristics forward? What are some of the ways in which you promote the tea itself?
So our customers, we are primarily B2B. So we are reaching out to businesses to say, if you are creating a new tea, or if you are if you are wanting to look for options for your current teas, we are competitive in terms of the value that we offer, and we are competitive in terms of the range of flavors, and range of characteristics. So if you're looking for a tea that is less astringent, if you're looking for a tea that blends well with a certain other flavor ingredient, if you're looking for a functional tea with certain health benefits, you want to be able to do those things with the right tea, the right characteristics in terms of flavor, color, aroma, so you get the overall experience that the customer is looking for and enjoys.
So for our listeners to understand, B2B means business to business. So Jason, who are some of your major customers then for your tea?
So I would kind of back up to say our major customers are facilities that service brands. So that's to say, I could say names, but they're not names that you would walk up to and just pick up off the shelf. You would probably be seeing their customers' names on the shelf, and I would have to.
Mm-hmm.
To do that, I would want to make sure I have permission to do that before I go too far to that.
No worries. No worries. But is it that you're selling to restaurants? Are you selling to food service? Are you selling, what type of customer is your customer?
Right. So our customer takes our teas, uses and sells them either as a straight specialty tea, and they may be doing that in a pyramid tea and packing that into like a pyramid tea bag, so it's more of a premium offering. They could be taking a component type of tea that they put into a blend, and again that blend could be used for an iced tea. It could be for food service, be it food service or a consumer or a packaged iced tea, packaged hot teas. So you would see when you go to a grocery store, you could be picking up our teas. When you go to a restaurant, you could be drinking our teas, and likely if you were drinking a tea, enjoying a tea that has a Chinese component, there's a good chance it came from us, but you wouldn't see our name on it, and you wouldn't see our direct customer's name on it either.
So in effect, you are affecting the tea drinking market on a pretty broad scale, because your product could be found in other teas, it could be found in how a restaurant uses it, and so forth. We've been talking today with Jason Walker. He's the marketing director of Firsd Tea North America. Jason, I saw one of your varieties, and it's called dried blue butterfly pea flowers, which actually turn the water blue. Please talk a little bit about the characteristics of this particular tea and why people should drink it.
This is a very fun tea, I should say, because you can play around with it so much. The blue butterfly pea flower is originally from Thailand area. If you go to Southeast Asia, it can be found in a lot of things, actually. People make a summer drink from it. People have started experimenting and throwing a few of the flowers into their rice cooker so that they actually come out with this vibrant blue rice. It's a very easy ingredient to use. All you need to do is put the flour into hot water and steep it, and as you said, you get that very deep, vibrant blue color. But the fun part is you put a few drops of lemon into it. The acidity changes the characteristics, so it goes from a blue to a purple. You put in a hibiscus leaf or flower, which is deep red, deep crimson, and so that changes the color more to a amethyst or a purplish type of color as well. You can combine it with lemongrass and get a vibrant green color. We've done it with mint as well and some other ingredients, and you get kind of a deep green color. You can get a full range of colors, and the beauty of the pea flower is you get the color without a lot of flavor components, so it doesn't throw off the other characteristics. You're able to taste and enjoy the flavor that you desire without the pea flower interfering.
So how would our listeners come to find this product? Because it sounds incredibly interesting and fun and has all these wonderful characteristics that can change depending on what you add.
There are a few online retailers. We are currently launching our own version of a retail package, actually two different versions. You can buy the leaf, and you can you can buy the flower, just like a loose flower, and a package of, I believe it's like 1 or 2 ounces. And we also do tea bag format, so you can get about 15 tea bags in a pack, and we'll be launching that on Amazon very shortly. Another fun thing that people are doing with it is that mixologists are finding ways to use it in cocktails. So if you dropped a few flowers into your clear liquor, like a vodka or a gin, you're going to get that deep color that you can use to create all kinds of new drink expressions.
I think that's really fantastic, because I think everyone's always looking for something different in their experiences, and I think that maybe they don't pay so much attention to tea. And I wonder sometimes, and I would love to hear you talk about it, what you think Americans don't understand about the importance of tea and especially how it's prepared. That's there's a lot of traditions in China in terms of how tea is prepared that I don't think we appreciate as Americans. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. I think one of the things we may want to touch on in the beginning is some people are hearing a lot about green teas and the health benefits of green teas, and that's certainly an important point to note. It's good to know that there are so much value in terms of the studies talking about heart health, about bone health, about cognitive benefits of teas, especially green teas. It would be useful to know, though, that green tea is talked about so much because green tea is generally studied more than black teas. So there is good reason to believe that those healthy components found in green teas can be found in other teas as well. So don't feel like if you don't like green tea, you have to stomach it to get the health benefits. There are health benefits in all teas. I would also go on to say that there are, like you were saying, there are many different ways to prepare teas. Depending on what your tea traditions are, you can get into something more elaborate like the Japanese and the Chinese tea ceremonies, where you're having special equipment. It can be artistic expression as you watch it. But tea can be very simple as well. Tea can be your tea bag in your favorite cup, enjoyed at home, and it can be done with milk. It can be enjoyed with lemon. So it really is. It's free. It's liberating, and it's convenient to do in the way that is comfortable for you.
Yeah, and I think there's maybe a growing appreciation for tea. The one of the curious things to me is when I've had, because I lived in Hong Kong for some time, is how the tea is prepared seems as important as drinking the tea. That there's a washing of the tea, and then there's the steeping of the tea. Can you talk a little bit about why that's so important? Is it just a tradition, or is there sort of some chemical thing that goes on because of it?
Depending on the type of tea, for example, you often see that taking place with oolong teas and perhaps some of those dark teas or those pu'er teas that I mentioned before. Because a lot of oolong teas go through a process where they are twisted very tightly, or they may be crumpled up into like a ball. It looks like a tiny green wad of paper. And you want that first round of rinsing, sometimes it's called, because you want that water to kind of shock the leaf, loosen it up so that it steeps more evenly that second and subsequent steeps. It's actually kind of a way to wake up the leaf. That first rinse can be kind of a thinner in terms of its body and its taste. So some people just throw that out. Some people think, but then others would say, oh, that's a perfectly good waste of tea. I'm going to sip that and enjoy it too. So it's you'll see different interpretations of that, and I'm not going to be the type that say that one is right and one is wrong.
No, that's terrific. Again, we've been talking with Jason Walker. He's the marketing director of Firsd Tea North America. I'm curious, Jason, what are some of the you talked about some trade war things, but we won't touch on that. But what do you think are some of the unique challenges you face specifically in getting your product to the U.S. consumer, to the U.S. market?
So I think we touched on this a little bit before, and that's just kind of the general understanding of China and Chinese teas and the quality of the product. I think there's this perception of China and Chinese products that may not accurately reflect the degree of intensity that China goes through to assure that their teas and their ingredients meet rigorous quality standards, so that teas that leave China go into Europe without a hitch. They come into the United States without a hitch because they comply, and in some cases even exceed the compliance levels that are expected of those teas that come in. And that's something that needs to be shared. And we touched on the ethical component. I would want to make sure that people know, like we were saying, that Chinese tea is generally a nation of small farmers. It is not those mega plantations where you hear about labor strikes and things like that.
Wonderful. Would you say that your products are fairly broadly distributed across the country because of the ways in which you sell your products? Sometimes it's an ingredient in other products, sometimes it's sort of direct. Or do you have certain concentrations geographically of where your product is selling?
So Firsd Tea brings our teas in by the container load, and we bring those containers into East and West Coast warehouses. Our customers are spread across the map in the U.S. here. Zheijang Tea Group's customers are spread across the globe, of course. So you could walk into pretty much any store or any restaurant and have a chance to enjoy our teas in one form or another, although you may not, like we said, may not see our name on it.
But as the marketing director, do you also promote a product that's branded? And how do you do that?
We have been working more with grocery retailers who are currently, they are interested in private label. I just came back from the private label manufacturing trade show in Chicago. It was last week. There was a lot of interest in a couple of areas. There's interest in ready-to-drink teas. That category is growing by leaps and bounds. And private label tea, you'll see that a lot of the tea consumed in the U.S. is consumed at home, especially hot teas. So grocery and retailers are looking for that packaged tea that is competitive. Generally, one that offers a functional or health benefit is something that consumers are looking for, and they want a good value too, because now more and more private labels are being trusted, and in some cases they're getting trusted more than national brands, depending on what the item is.
Yes, certainly. So, Jason, maybe a tough question. Tell me your proudest moment so far in marketing Firsd Tea.
I think that we started the year without any kind of strong private label offering, or what we call in the industry, we call a packer label. And a packer label, I'll just kind of briefly define that. A packer label is a brand that it doesn't really get pushed hard in terms of marketing. It's something that you can bring to a grocer or a retailer and say, look, this is a brand. You can put it on your shelf. You can see how it moves, and if you like the numbers you're seeing there, we can take that brand off and put your brand on that. So it's a way for the retailers to run a test, see what they like, and then make it their own. And we kind of started the year with at zero, and we have something that we are ready to put on the shelf now. So we are looking forward to working with several major companies to let them try that out and see how it goes.
Well, I've really enjoyed our conversation, Jason. We've been talking with Jason Walker of Firsd Tea North America. Jason, please tell our audience your website and spell it out since it's a listening audience.
Yes, it is. And then, like you said, it's kind of a tricky name. Our website is Firsd Tea, and that's FIRSD as in Delta, TEA like the drink, .com.
A link to Firsd Tea North America's website will be on foodandwineinsider.com tonight. You can also hear all of our past and our upcoming future programs on foodandwineinsider.com. And please participate in a short survey telling us what you think of the show and how to improve its service to you. Jason, I really have enjoyed chatting with you. I think we could talk more about China and the distinctiveness. I've learned an awful lot about the growers in China and your passion certainly for tea that has been there for a very long time. So I thank you so much for being a part of Food and Wine Insider.
Thanks, Anna. I really enjoyed it, and I hope we can do it again.
Wonderful. Thank you. We will be back with our guest after these messages.
Food and Wine Insider.
To be successful, most restaurant owners require extra capital from time to time. When you need funding to renovate, buy equipment, or manage cash flow, you don't have time to track down financial statements or wait weeks for a decision. That's where Cabbage can help. Cabbage gives small businesses access to a line of credit of up to $200,000. Apply online and you'll get a decision right away. Since Cabbage is a line of credit, you can take the exact amount you need. You never have to reapply to take additional loans, and you'll only pay for the funds you use. Cabbage has helped more than 230,000 businesses from every industry. And with $4 billion in funding, Cabbage is A+ rated by the Better Business Bureau and was named the Forbes Top 100 Companies twice in a row. Check out Cabbage at cabbagewithak.com/foodandwine, and you'll get a $50 gift card when you qualify. That's KABBAGE.com/foodandwine.
Line of credit is subject to credit approval. See terms and conditions. All Cabbage business loans are issued by Celtic Bank, a Utah-chartered industrial bank, member FDIC.
The Maple Guild is the largest maple cooperative, certainly in the States, I'm sure in the world. And here to tell us about it is John Campbell. He is the VP of Sales and Marketing for the Maple Guild. This is Ann Daw, your host for Food and Wine Insider. John Campbell is of the Maple Guild. It's out of Island Pond, Vermont. Welcome to Food and Wine Insider, John.
Thank you for having me, Ann.
Let's start with a little bit about you. You've been in sales for a long time and handling some pretty iconic brands, Coca-Cola, Red Bull, 5 Hour Energy, and even helped to expand the presence of brands like Coco Libre. What attracted you to Maple Guild?
Oh, gosh, where do I begin? I'd say there were a number of things that attracted me. First off, one of the gentlemen who introduced me to the Maple Guild is someone I had worked with in the past and truly enjoyed working with and greatly respected. So that was point one, right? That's what started the conversation. The thing that he sold to me that really got me interested is innovation, is single source, owning that source, right? And doing it in ways other people haven't in the past. So innovation not only of products, but also of process. And having that innovation of process lead to that innovation of products and all the different things that we can do and show within the versatility of maple. I think that, to me, seemed to be something that was lacking within this category and within this industry, and I was all too excited to get on board and help out.
So tell us a little bit more about the work that the Maple Guild itself does.
Sure. So Maple Guild, so we bought and tapped our first trees in 2013 and quickly became the largest supplier of maple syrup, as you alluded to in the intro, in the world, believe it or not. We will tap this year. We will tap about 500,000 plus trees. So we are at 500,000 and marching our way to 1 million taps within a few years, hopefully. And so becoming the largest single source producer of maple syrup in the world, we also started to work to pioneer how that sap that we draw from these 500,000 trees is processed into syrup. And we went away from the old tried and true direct heat methods, right? So the typical way that you turn sap into syrup is you boil it with a direct heat from underneath, whether that be wood or coal, in the same way you would boil water on your stove, right? And it takes a long time for that water to heat up, right? Because it's starting from the bottom. It's got to make its way all the way to the top of that pot. Well, that's how sap is processed into syrup. We came at it from a different angle, thanks to Joe Russo, who's our chief operating officer, and I fondly refer to him as the Willy Wonka of maple syrup. That's kind of how I view him. And so he kind of pioneered this steam crafting process, which takes the sap and puts it into these large steam evaporators and heats it with steam from all sides, top, bottom, sides, so that the moment that sap hits the evaporator, it immediately processes. So we can make a 55-gallon drum of syrup in less than 3 minutes. So it becomes a less processed, more delicate, and as we say, more maplier, a truer maple flavor. You don't get that kind of burnt caramel, caramelized sugar tones that people so associate with maple. Instead, you get the subtle nuances of the trees and the forest and all of those different flavors that are there. So that's where we started, right? And that became the backbone of everything that we do and innovate from, is that grade A, golden, steam-crafted, organic Vermont maple syrup that Joe started to create.
It's really amazing to me that you've only been in business really since 2013. And as you were saying earlier, you have almost 1 million taps, which kind of blows my mind. Do you run lines actually from the maple trees to the sugar house, or are you actually bucketing and moving in a more traditional way? I'm just really curious, because that's a lot of taps.
That is. So we're at 500,000 now. We're working towards 1 million, but 500,000 in itself is still insanely large. We have about, everything is line fed, right? So it is all through lines and a massive 6,000-mile line tap system that's currently in place across 16,000 acres of sugar bush, all in the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont. So what we have kind of outposts, or as we call them there, are RO centers, reverse osmosis centers, that starts the processing for us. And lines are fed directly to these RO centers throughout our sugar bush, which were all built by hand by our team. We kind of do everything ourselves. We pride ourselves on tree to table. That includes building the buildings in which we work from. So from the RO centers, it is then trucked down to our main sugar house in Island Pond, which actually used to be the old Ethan Allen factory. So as you can imagine, it's a fairly sizable structure, and that is where we continue and turn all of our sap into syrup.
I want to continue on the whole process piece, because you also are dedicated to sustainability. I would love for you to tell our audience about how you preserve the forest and reduce the fuel and carbon footprint of the process that you use to make maple syrup.
From a forest standpoint, obviously we keep it as pristine as humanly possible. We're not cutting things down. We're only building. From a tree perspective, every tree that we tap, and as I mentioned, this year will be 500,000 of them. We go out and the team starts the day after Christmas and begins tapping all of those trees. And when the season's over, when Mother Nature has decided to stop letting these trees produce sap for us, the team will go around and they will untap all 500,000 of those trees to give them the opportunity to heal. A healthy tree is a happy tree. And then the next year, we won't tap it in the same spot. We'll tap it 6 inches up and 6 inches over or down, so that it continues to give those spots plenty of time to heal. Additionally, we won't tap a tree before it's ready. Typically, that means a 50-year-old tree at a certain diameter and circumference. Those are all organic standards of which we adhere to complicitly and completely. So that, to me, is one of the ways in which we are continuing to be stewards of the forest, taking what Mother Nature gives us and making sure that we take care of her in return. From a processing standpoint, when it comes to sustainability and making sure that we're being as effective and efficient as possible, I lean, again, back on Joe, our Willy Wonka, right? He is constantly coming up with new ways to be more efficient. And one of those things that we've done over the past year and a half or so are we took our massive steam evaporators, and Joe looked at them and said, what if we were to double them in size by putting another steam evaporator on top of this one, the way you might a double boiler? And he was able to design that so that we can now make twice as much syrup with half as much energy.
That's fantastic. You know,
Yeah.
I do want to highlight the fact that you don't use any chemical fertilizers or pesticides.
Nope.
So you're
Nope.
organic, you're non-GMO. And
Correct.
I was really amazed when I did read that your trees have to be 50 years old. It just seems, wow. You know, something has to be 50 before it's valuable. So,
Right.
Which is, in a lot of other categories, is not the case.
It's the exact opposite, right?
It's the exact opposite. As a consumer, how do you distinguish among brands that all say maple syrup? Is there a standard of identity? Is there some way that the consumer really gets to know why your maple syrup is really so special versus others on the market?
Sure. We're working on that, right? I think that's probably the toughest thing that we face, especially because we're coming at it from a completely different perspective or viewpoint or process than ever been done in the past. So obviously there are the grading system, right? Grade A golden is the lightest, most delicate, hardest to make maple syrup out there, and that's the only maple syrup that we make from our original maple syrup. So that's one. We call out as much as we can on our packaging and our labels. We've gone at it from, instead of using the tried and true plastic jugs or small glass jug handle bottles, we've taken that up a notch with almost what looked like bourbon bottles, liquor bottles, right? Something that stands out on the shelf, that the label calls out non-GMO, calls out organic, calls out and talks about steam crafting and the process that we've trademarked there. So we're trying to educate through that, and then obviously, the rest of the marketing team has an education piece to it, right? To talk about it on social, to talk about why this maple syrup is different than any other maple syrup you've ever tried before. And it's always fun for me to sit down in my job with buyers or at a trade show with people who have prided themselves on knowing maple syrup and knowing the category, and then watching them taste this and seeing their eyes light up and say, you weren't kidding. I've never had anything like this before. This is amazing. That, to me, those are always the best moments.
And on your packaging, how prominent is the word the Maple Guild? Because guild says to me some kind of cooperative, but you use that word for a specific reason, I'm assuming.
We do. We use it because a guild to us is a group of people who come together for a single purpose and focus on it completely and in an artisanal way. And that's how we view ourselves, and that's how we view the 100 folks that we have up in Island Pond who are now out there tapping trees or helping to create these products. We view ourselves as that guild because the maple to us and the quality of maple to us is paramount over everything.
We've been speaking with John Campbell. He's the VP of Sales and Marketing for the Maple Guild. Now, John, in terms of from a sales and marketing side, how do you talk about the brand and the products to retailers?
Sure. I talk about it as somebody doing something within the maple syrup category that people really haven't done in a very long time, and that's innovate. again, not just in process, but in products. I get to tell them about single source difference. And to me, that's probably one of the largest differences that we bring to the table that nobody else can. We are 500,000 taps strong. That makes us 2.5 to 3 times larger than the next single source producer in the world. So we control that consistency, that quality, as I mentioned, from tree to table. And that's super important to us to make sure that if you get a Maple Guild product, you're always getting the same consistency and quality. Whereas other maple syrups, they're getting syrup from different suppliers, right? The moms and pops, the smaller suppliers, and they're blending it all together. It's not that it's a bad product, it's just different from what we do. And I think that single source piece, that traceability, is important to consumers. I think they want to know about that. I get to talk about steam crafting and the different process. I get to talk about organic, non-GMO. I get to talk about pricing because, yes, our product, in my opinion, and the way we do it, is a superior product. It's the best maple syrup in the world, if you ask me. And I mean that. I don't just say that. I actually mean that, and I love to see people agree with me. So you'd think it's really expensive, but it's not because we own the trees. We're not a middleman who's buying syrup. We're making syrup, and we only make syrup. So we can create this beautiful product from the trees and sell it at a reasonable price so that we can bring maple to the masses, if you will. Not only from a price standpoint, but from a production standpoint, because we have the supply, we have the scale that we can be sold everywhere from Vermont to Southern California.
So where are you focusing your sales? And could you talk a little bit about how much you sell on, or what percentage you sell online versus in the stores?
Sure. I would say right now we're probably at 95% in the stores, especially this year as our distribution has expanded nationally. Our main focus is grocery, natural specialty, and we're focusing, gosh, I want to say pretty much everywhere but our backyard. We haven't focused a ton in Vermont, to be honest with you, because that, to me, is owned by those small suppliers, those folks who have been doing this for hundreds of years and generations down through family, and they only produce a small amount, and they rely on the small stores in Vermont to be able to sell that. So we haven't really focused on that. We've let them continue to own that and love that and keep those roots there because we feel that's really important. And we've tried to go outside of our backyard and go to, the larger grocery chains who don't have a name brand in maple syrup, who don't have a Vermont, let alone a U.S. maple syrup on their shelves because they're getting everything from Canada. And that's where we've really honed in our focus, kind of on those larger chains and those areas almost furthest away from the Northeast, where they just don't have Vermont maple syrup.
Right. And you mentioned earlier, because of the way you produce it, you're actually providing the consumer with an affordable maple syrup. Talk a little bit about, what your pricing is like versus the other brands on the market. I know it's kind of a hard comparison because some of them are not pure maple syrups, but if you could just talk about, there is a value, obviously, to having a really premium product. But if you could just say a little bit about the pricing, that would be awesome for our listeners.
Sure. I don't think you're going to find an organic Vermont maple syrup that's going to be better priced than ours. You may find a non-organic maple syrup that's maybe 50 cents or $1 cheaper. You might find an organic maple syrup out of Canada that's, grade A dark amber, that may be 50 cents or $1 cheaper. But that's about it. So if you're in the pure maple syrup category and you're looking for a Vermont maple syrup, an American-made maple syrup, we're probably going to be the best priced one out there for you.
Okay. Your product line is more than just maple syrup. I saw that you have teas,
yes.
You have creams, you have pumpkin spiced, and you have something called tapt, T-A-P-T. Can you talk a little bit about these other product lines as a part of your business?
Of course. Gosh, be happy to. As I mentioned before, when I was talking a little bit about how we make our original grade A golden maple syrup, I mentioned that it's the backbone of everything else that we do. And that couldn't be truer. If we couldn't make a light, delicate, steam-crafted grade A golden maple syrup the way Joe has pioneered, we couldn't do any of the other innovation that you just mentioned. So we're taking that syrup and we're infusing it. We're not adding flavorings. We're infusing it with real ingredients, or organic vanilla beans or organic cinnamon sticks for our vanilla bean infused or our cinnamon stick infused. We're aging it in used Kentucky bourbon barrels to get our bourbon barrel-aged maple syrup. We are adding organic nutmeg and ginger and pumpkin spices to get, thank you Starbucks, we all have to do it now, pumpkin spiced maple syrup, right? We've even taken it so that we've put it through a second steam crafting process to caramelize it a bit more and get more of that, darker color and that caramelization of the sugar, and added just a touch of sea salt for our salted caramel maple syrup. We have other innovation in the works, from bird's eye chili infused to a coffee infused, which is, in my opinion, one of the most perfect breakfast syrups we've yet to do. Everything from mixed berry to orange cardamom. There are so many flavors that blend well with maple, and when you have a light, delicate maple that can truly absorb those flavors, it's a perfect vessel for it. So those are our, as we call them, our infusions. We also have our maple butter. Maple cream, it kind of can be called either. It is a single ingredient, spreadable maple syrup. It is just our syrup that has been painstakingly churned until it reaches that perfect spreadable consistency, and it is to die for. Put it on an English muffin with some crumbled bacon on it, dip some apples or pretzels in it, anything you would do with an almond butter or a Nutella, right? But it's just churned maple syrup, and it's delicious. We also have our maple vinegar, which is probably one of the most unique products that we have, and I can sit here and say we're the only people who make it. Why? Because we have that size, and we are happy to take a sap run towards the end of the season and not make syrup out of it, which not many other suppliers would be willing to do. So we take that sap and that has that beautiful natural sugar content, and we let it sit and we let it naturally ferment for about 6 months in our stainless steel tanks, and then we move it over to used California wine barrels, and we let it age for a year, and it becomes this beautiful vinegar that has a subtle hint of sweetness that you can use as a dressing, as a marinade. My wife loves to put it over bitter greens like an arugula. We're going to be using it on our Brussels sprouts come Thanksgiving in a few days. And I mean, it is fantastic. And it actually has the same prebiotic, probiotic gut health benefits that like an apple cider vinegar has. So you can even do a shot of it for gut health.
Talking with John Campbell. He's the VP of Sales and Marketing for the Maple Guild. I think it's great. You got into so many of the products, and I was really fascinated by your maple vinegar and the notion that you would take this organic maple sap, you ferment it in California wine barrels, and you won a NEXTY award, an NEXTY award. Talk about that award and what it's meant to the company.
It's been great. That was actually our second NEXTY win, believe it or not. We got back-to-back for our maple butter and then our maple vinegar. And it has been great for us to introduce ourselves to the marketplace. We may have tapped our first tree in 2013, but we've only been in distribution since 2016, at the very end. 2017. So it's been really huge for us to be able to sit across from a buyer, to talk to folks in the industry and say, hey, these have been recognized as unique and wonderful and new and exciting. So it's been great for us. We've been very grateful for those opportunities that have been provided.
And the NEXTY award came from what organization?
That came from New Hope Media, who runs two of the larger natural food trade shows, Natural Products Expo East and Natural Products Expo West. We won butter, was at Expo East, and vinegar was Expo West.
Okay. And you also have these drinks. You have, talk a little bit about, that's a whole other category and a whole other positioning in a different part of the grocery store and so on. So also has its own challenges. Talk a little bit about those products.
Yeah, very much so. Again, it goes back to the original maple syrup, that backbone of all that we do. Because it's light, because it's delicate, because it's subtle, it is the perfect, natural, low glycemic, better for you alternative sweetener for the beverage world. The way folks are trying to use agave or honey, right, to sweeten their beverages because they don't want to use table sugar or artificial sugars or artificial sweeteners. This is a great product for that. So we started with our ready-to-drink tea, green tea, black tea blends with a number of everybody's favorite flavors, which are all natural fruit flavors, raspberry, ginger, peach, lemon, and it is 45 calories per serving, 90 in the whole bottle, and a low glycemic natural sweetener. And if you taste it and you try it, you're just going to taste a lovely, delicate, sweet tea. You're not going to say, who put maple syrup in my tea? It's not meant to be overpowering, and none of our products are. Everything's meant to be subtle, and this tea is exactly that, just a perfect, subtle sweetness. And then you have Tapt, which is our enhanced water that is also sweetened with our maple syrup. And we add B vitamins, antioxidants, electrolytes, so that you have this wonderful, complete, functional beverage that has just a touch of sweetness and not a ton of calories or unnecessary sugar. All, again, low glycemic, natural, better for you sweetener. So those are kind of our first dip into the beverage world, where I was fortunate to spend a lot of my past career time in that beverage world. And we've got a couple other things in the hopper that we're working on, more in the fermented beverage line. So we're hoping to come out with a few of those by next year. That we're pretty excited about, working on in the test kitchen up in Island Pond. But yeah, I mean, they've been really well received. People love them when they get to try them, and again, it's an education, right? To show maple as a sweetener that is not making your drink taste like pancakes. Well,
John, I think I may barely have time for one last question, but I did want to ask you this question, though it seems to be coming through in your voice, is what makes you most proud of being a part of this company?
Gosh, I hinted at it before when saying to watch people taste our product and fall in love with it, I think is probably the thing I'm most proud of. And not because I got the opportunity to introduce it to them, but because of all of the hard work that goes on behind the scenes to create those products. From 6,000 miles of tap lines that have been laid to tapping and untapping 500,000 trees within 4 months of each other, to working 24 hours a day, round the clock during the season to make sure that we capture all that sap and process it perfectly, Guild maple syrup, and then to continue to innovate and come up with new ideas and play around in the test kitchen and make these products. And the people who do it and the pride that they put into it, to see that hard work manifested on somebody's face and in their kind words after tasting our products, to me, is what makes me the most proud to be here.
Wonderful. Well, we've been speaking with John Campbell of the Maple Guild. John, please share with our audience your website address, and you may want to spell it out so that they know what it is.
You've got it. It's, believe it or not, it is www.mapleguild.com, MAPLEGUILD.com.
Food and Wine Insider.
Well, a link to the Maple Guild's website will be on foodandwineinsider.com tonight. You can also hear all of our past and our upcoming programs on foodandwineinsider.com and participate in a short survey telling us what guests you think should be joining the show and how to improve what we offer to you. Food and Wine Insider is also now available on iTunes. John, thank you so much for being a part of our show, and it's very exciting, the work that you're doing at the Maple Guild, and just offer you future success.
Thank you so much, Ann.
You've been listening to Food and Wine Insider with Ann Daw and Don Mazzella. Want to join us on a future show? Contact us at foodandwineinsider.com. Until next time, have a passion for food, wine, and profits, and think of our program, Food and Wine Insider.